Hey everyone, thanks for joining me today. We're gonna paint something moody and kind of loose. I just felt like having fun with this one. I don't have a reference photo, so I hope you follow along and paint with me. Let me know if you have any questions and whether you painted it. Supplies are listed below, so let's get started. So as always, I start out with wetting my paper, the whole page. Make sure you don't have any puddles. I find wetting the paper makes it easier for the colors to go into the paper, for the paper to not be so dry, and I can easily blend. So here I am picking up one of the colors in the palette. This is Philosophy Vintage Pastel set. I'm picking up like a grayish brown and then the light green here, and make sure you have a decent amount because we're going to start with the sky. So let me show you what the colors look like and how much water I've added. It's not a very thick mix, and I want to make sure that I have enough of each before I get started. So I'm going to start with my round 2 brush and dabbing in the grayish brown color starting at the top left corner. You want the top corners to be darker in your sky, and then just kind of use mostly water to blend out the color across the page. I'm not going to cover the whole sky with this color. I want to leave some white space for clouds that we're going to create later. I'm dropping in color straight from the palette so that it's a bit more saturated in the top corners and gently blending it out. When you're blending, make sure you don't have too much color in your brush or too much water. Now I think I switched over to my 6th round at this point to help with the blending a little bit better and for the brush to carry a bit more water. This paper tends to be drier than other paper I've noticed. This is Arches 100% cotton. So I do find myself needing more water oftentimes, and I also live in a pretty dry climate where things dry pretty quickly. So working quickly, I'm putting in just strokes here and there, not too much. My color itself is not too saturated either. And just making sure that I pick up my brush as I dance across the page. I'm leaving white space, and then just the colors I'm dropping down is not too saturated or too thick. And then of course, like I always do, get a wet piece of paper towel, and we're just gonna dab up a few spots to create clouds. Gently do this. You don't want to pick up all of the moisture because that can create hard lines. So I'm going to keep working on the clouds until I'm pleased with it, but if you're pleased with yours, then you can simply step away. I found it really hard to stop sometimes when I'm working on clouds, and also I find that I might be pleasantly surprised if I do stop and kind of step away and then come back to it later. Here I am using my smaller round brush just to kind of clean the edges, soften up the edges, and kind of spread around the color a little bit more to create more varied values of this color in the sky. So I know it looks like I'm fussing with it quite a lot, but just trying to create a shape of clouds that I want to create, and then using the techniques of blending and lifting with my paper towel, and dropping in wet on wet here and there until I am pleased. Just kind of using a variety of techniques here until I get to the place that I want. But please do stop if your paper is dry, your sky is dry, because it's going to be hard to do any of these techniques when the paper is dry. Alright, moving on to the foreground, I am using my larger round. This happens to be a 4, which I feel like is larger than a typical 4 round, so you might need a 6. But I started with yellow ochre and a touch of undersea green, and I want to make sure that this layer is light because we're going to be layering on top of this. Make sure that you are painting in a horizontal direction. We want to paint the same direction as your subject, which is the ground. Keep this loose, keep this light, no pressure right here. Just have fun. If you're feeling brave, you can drop in a little bit of burnt sienna as well. Work on the background trees. I'm using undersea green, perylene green, Payne's gray, burnt sienna, mixing it all together for a warmish, dark green for our background trees. And we want to keep the background trees light as well, kind of blurry. And we're going to use the tip of our round brush to loosely drop in some suggestions of foliage lines. Doesn't have to be perfect. My paper or my ground is still a little wet, so that's why you see a lot of blending there at the bottom. You can drop in here and there a little bit more of the darker mix that you have, particularly sort of at the bottom part of your bushes out there, just to create the illusion of shadows on the ground. Cleaning off my brush, it's mostly moist right now. I'm just gonna mess up the top part of our tree lines in the background. I don't want it to be focused. I want it to be blurry because it's not supposed to be in detail because it's so far away. So I messed it up a little bit, blend it out, make sure I don't have a lot of hard lines, dropping in a little bit more of the darker colors here and there to create more body in the bushes. So moving down towards the sort of the feel or the foreground now. Using my homemade foliage brush, you can check out the an older video that I made on how to create this. This is my flat foliage brush. I love to use this one. So I'm going to show you how I used it in this project. We're going to dry this before moving on to the next step. Alright, so I'm going to use my flat foliage brush now to paint a bush for the foreground. If you don't have a foliage brush, you can use a round brush as well. Picking up a yellowish green, so mostly my undersea green, pretty diluted and not too thick, and I'm painting it in, remembering to twist and turn and angle my brush in different directions to create different strokes or a variety of strokes. I'm not going to bring my bush all the way down, just maybe leaving a little bit of clearance from the bush to the end of the piece. I'm going to add more things down there later on. Concentrate a lot of your colors to the middle and bottom part of the bush to create darkness towards the middle, because you have a lot more twigs and leaves in that area, and then lighter and wispier, airier brush strokes towards the outside to communicate tiny leaves and twigs kind of sticking out of the bush. I'm going to let the first bush dry, and I'm going to work on a bush or a grouping of bush here in the background. Since it is in the background, you want to make sure that it is smaller in size to the foreground bush, but we're using the same technique. Make sure that you kind of flatten out the bottom part to kind of ground it a little bit. You don't want it like a perfect circle or a perfect ball or anything. And all of this is done as wet and dry, so you should have a lot of control with your colors and water. And just take your time, build it up slowly. Remember to vary your strokes using your brush, and make sure you concentrate more color towards the bottom and inner part of the bush, and leave the outside part airier with more white space showing through. So we're going to use our round brush to ground the tree or ground the bush a little bit so that it doesn't look like it's floating in the air and it belongs to the ground that it's on top of. Alright, so we're going to clean off our round brush. No colors on it, it's moist, and we're going to mess up the edges of the background bushes. I want to kind of mess up the edges, kind of make it blend into the background or into the sky, into the air around it. I don't want anything too crisp. I want this to be messy and kind of dirty and moody and loose, the best as we can. So I do that by using a moist, clean brush to softly and gently do that. Mess up the edges. And then I'm picking up, I noticed that my furthest tree line might be a little too light for my liking, so I'm dropping in a little bit of light value green again, and just kind of blending it down onto the ground, just to kind of make it look like it belongs to the ground too, just a way of grounding it. And then I'm going to ground the other bushes, so lots of grounding, sorry. Make sure that in your grounding you use darker colors towards the base inner part of your shadow, because it's darkest towards that area, and dropping your darkest color and then cleaning off your brush and using mostly water to blend out the shadows. So you're both adding shadows, you're adding shadows as a way of grounding the trees or the bushes. I hope that makes sense. And sometimes I like to use my foliage brush to create textures on the ground too. It's not just for painting bushes and trees. I use it quite often to just create textures and grass and rocks and suggestions of those things. So that's what I'm doing right here, is picking up some color. My brush isn't very wet, it's mostly moist, and I have a good amount of color, and I'm just putting in strokes of grass, some quick light vertical brush strokes. Towards you want your brush strokes or your grass strokes to be bigger, and then as you go further away towards the horizon, you want your brush strokes or your grass strokes to be smaller, so you can kind of use your brush to control the size of your foliage of the grass sticking up. And then also notice that towards the horizon, I use my that flat foliage brush, wow, that's a mouthful, in sort of a horizontal direction as well. I don't want my grass to stick up too much because it's further away. And then using my round brush to drop in burnt sienna here and there, just to add some warmth and character and interest to the foreground. I'm just kind of having fun here. I don't really have a reference photo for this, and so just have fun, drop in colors here and there. If you dropped in something that you don't like, you can always lift it up with a wet or moist brush or paper towel. Here I am using my mop brush to kind of blend everything. You can do that when you feel like you have too much texture. You just blend it out, or you can lay down a layer of texture and then blend it out and then add more texture later on, and this is a good way to kind of build it up. It makes it more dimensional, I think, and more interesting as a whole when you build it up. So that's kind of what I'm doing right here, as I'm adding more texture after I blend it out, making sure that I keep enough light in there by not covering up a lot of that light green feel that we painted as our first layer. Alright, we're going to pick up some Dr. P.H. Martin bleedproof white, putting in a little bit of water to wake it up. You want a pretty thick mixture. I'm using my round brush here. Use a paper towel to cover up the upper part of your painting and tap in some splatters. Remember to turn your brush in different directions to get different splatter directions, I guess. The bigger your brush, the bigger your splatters. The smaller your brush, the smaller your splatters. And then it also depends on how close or far away you are from the page as well when you splatter. So I am here just cleaning off the white splatters on my bush. I don't want those there, so just coloring it in with the green. So here I am mixing up a dark green and using my round brush and the tip of it, just adding suggestions of stems here and there to go up to some of the white splatters to make it look like flowers and brush. Adding more of the white paint and a pretty thick layer here and there just to suggest a foreground of white flowers. So work on that part until you're pleased with that. So I'm going to leave the foreground alone for a little bit. My sky is now dry. I'm using my round brush to get more of that grayish brown that we used at the beginning. I'm going to go in and do some dry brushing in the clouds, in the sky, and pretty much I've chosen to use my Princeton Snap because the bristles are harder than my Ooku, I think that's how you pronounce it, round, which are softer. So you want to choose a bristle that is kind of hard and get rid of most of the water on it, pick up some color, it should be moist, and then just paint in the part of the clouds where the grayish brown are by using the dry brushing technique. So you can kind of see that the colors are coming on to the page, but it's not bleeding or blending. It's kind of staying where it is because the paper itself is dry and the brush is mostly dry with more colors in it than water. So you can also see that I also used my mop brush to kind of blend out some of the textures created by the dry brushing technique. You can skip this dry brushing step if you prefer to. You don't have to do this, but that was kind of the look that I was going for. And then just a little bit of touch up here and there, blending out the line between the ground and the sky just to mess it up, make it blurry, make it moodier. Again, you don't have to do this. And then I think I decided to add some yellow flowers onto the foreground, but we need to dry it first. blending out the sky a little bit more. Just a little bit too much texture for me there. I want just enough. Again, I'm really messing with this more than I need to. It's hard to stop, like I said. And again, I think I lost some of that value difference there in the dark corners of my sky, so I'm adding more grayish brown to the corners. I lost some of that. You can do this. This is wet on dry mostly, and then using a moist soft brush to kind of blend, especially blend the edges. I'm really not too worried about quote-unquote messing up my sky at this point, because my sky is supposed to be kind of messy and has a lot of texture, so I'm not too worried about this. And you know what, we're just having fun here. This is just a piece of paper. We can do this again if we want to. But if you're happy with your sky, please don't mess with it. Alright, that's enough sky. The foreground is dry now, so I'm going to drop in some of the yellow gold mixture to a few places. I'm putting it on top of the white paint that we've laid down so that it can show through a little bit, and then we're going to let this layer dry. Alright guys, I think we're done. I think we've done enough work, so I'm going to try to zoom in a little bit here so you can see. And let's do my favorite part, the tape reveal. Awesome, I love it. I love the moody look, the muted, dirty colors. I think I might be inspired by Monet, how he uses a lot of more muted colors, so I hope you enjoyed.